the fourth Sunday of Advent, we finally get to the Christmas story, right? Yay! We are finally there. You don't know how happy this makes pastors. Okay? And we start in this sort of weird place. We start in this sort of preamble where we meet our two main characters, or at least two of the three main characters of the Christmas story, Joseph and Mary. All right? And so I think today, because obviously Christmas will be focused on the baby, today it's good to step back and focus on Joseph and Mary, because they're really an interesting sort of couple here. And an interesting couple whose story, as you continue on, has, I think, an interesting reflection to our lives. What do I mean? Well, one thing, whenever you read the birth narratives, you'll find that Joseph is usually referred to as a righteous man, right? Mary, however, is never referred to as a righteous woman. Now, this isn't because Mary isn't good or Mary is bad or anything like that. I think this is because Mary is more driven by spirituality. Right? We know from reading the Magnificat, right? When the angel of the Lord comes to Mary, she immediately is like, I am a servant of the Lord. If this is what you call me to do, no matter how crazy and wild and insane it is, I'm there for you. Right? There's this deep sense of spirituality that you see in Mary when the angel comes to Mary. God simply says, are you on board? And Mary's like, heck yeah. Joseph, on the other hand, the righteous one, he's ready to divorce Mary. Presumably, Mary would have told him, because had Mary told anybody else and this gotten out, she would have been dragged to the middle of the courtyard and stoned to death according to Mosaic law, because she would have been an adulterer having been engaged. So if he's learned about it, he has learned about it from her. And I'm betting if an angel of the Lord came to Mary and said, this is what's going to happen, she told him, hopefully, the whole story, because it does not help her case to just be like, hey, hon, I'm pregnant. You'd really want to lead with an angel of the Lord came, I'm pregnant, right? So he has the same amount of information, and yet his righteous response is, you know what, I'll be nice, I'll quietly divorce her. And I think this tells us about the relationship between spirituality and righteousness and religiosity. Because the interesting thing that happens after the story, when you talk about someone who's primarily righteous but also spiritual versus someone who's spiritual primarily but also righteous, is that Mary and Joseph start in the same place, parents of the Messiah. But they don't end in the same place. Those of you who have read your Gospels know that if you follow Mary, you can follow her all the way, not just to the cross, but to the ascension, and not just from the ascension, but all the way into Acts. The story of Mary is a story of a woman who starts off mother of God and goes on to probably be a pastor in Jerusalem and the surrounding communities. Joseph's story is different. We see Joseph a lot in the birth narratives. He's definitely there. He's definitely on board. And then when Jesus pops up for his sort of teenage one moment where he ditches his parents, we see Joseph again. And then we never hear from the guy again. He's gone. From all the narratives. No one notes him again. When his son is dying on a cross, Mary is there. Joseph? When Lazarus is raised, Mary is there. Joseph? When Jesus ascends, Mary is there. Joseph? And I think there's a message in this for us. It's a message about how spirituality and religion should work and works the best. See, at the core of a Christian life is a spirituality. What do I mean with that? I mean your relationship with God. And from that, all the other relationships that flow, your relationship with your family, your relationship with your community, your relationship with your church, your relationship with all these other things. Start with that relationship with God. Okay? And that is maintained through the reading of the scriptures and prayer. Now, some folks say, well, I never pray. I'm like, well, do you ever talk to God? Well, yeah. Okay, well, if you're talking to God, that's prayer, right? So if you're in relationship with God and you're talking with God and you're studying your scriptures, that is the cornerstone of who we are. And from that flows theology, religiosity, all these other things, which are all good. And you need those things because in a spiritual life, if spirituality is your engine, you're going to have moments where you're praying to God and you feel like God is ignoring you. You're going to have times where getting up in the day and trying to feel a closeness with your community or with your family or with God seems impossible. This is part of the spiritual life. All Christians go through deserts. All Christians go through times that are hard. All Christians go through times in which they are mourning so much the spiritual world feels unable to be contacted. It is in those moments that our religious life steps in to bolster us, to hold us up. Because if it's too painful to pray in a daily basis with God, you know, if you show up to church, at least you got prayers there, right? If it's too hard to know what to do next and to listen to God because the world's gotten too busy, then you at least get a few moments of quietness at a church service where God's voice might break through. See, the relationship ought to be our spirituality is our engine. Our religiosity is the support. It helps us get over the spiritual deserts that we all inevitably hit as we grow. This is why every time in the Old Testament in particular, but also the New Testament, where you see someone go to the desert, it is the point in which their spirituality does not help them, but the religiosity often does. But that desert often happens right before the next mountaintop. It's in that desert that you start to define yourself. See, that's the relationship that God is trying to have. The relationship that I think Mary gets right, which is what gets Mary from birth to death and beyond. Joseph, on the other hand, I think has flipped these relationships around. I'd say he's spiritual too. I'd say he's righteous too, just like Mary's spiritual and righteous, except for his righteousness is what leads him. When God calls upon him, his reaction isn't, I am a servant of the Lord, of course I will do this, even though this seems bizarre and strange and insane. His reaction is, what will everyone at the synagogue think? I am a good all-American boy. I can't be. If I get involved with this girl, man. That's not what good guys do. See, the danger of having your religiosity be the cornerstone of who you are is that religiosity has always got a weakness. The weakness of religiosity is that it's rigid. And things which are rigid crumble in times of change. Things which are rigid can't flow with an ever-changing world with a God ever-changing it. Religion struggles. If you don't believe me, work with the church for a while. Churches move at the speed of church, which is slightly slower than a hyperglycemic snail. Right? But that's because religiosity too often becomes the engine, not spirituality. And surely, yes, he is a spiritual person too. If he had been purely a religious person, he would have rejected what the angel said. He would have walked away and said, demon, why are you tempting me? So there is a spirituality there. But I think at some point, in the life of his son, in the life of the Son of God, Joseph was like, kid, I just can't follow you one more step into this weird new world. And therefore, never made it to the cross. So I think there's a lesson for our own lives. And the lesson is this: what drives you? What leads you to be who you are? Is it a call from God in an ever-changing adventure that God is leading you on? Or is it religiosity of tradition, religiosity of theology, religiosity of human-made structures? What's your engine and what's your support? As you go out this week, ask yourself, is the engine that drives who I am spiritual, like Mary, with religion getting me through the hard times? Or is the engine that drives me the religiosity of Joseph, with spirituality supplementing?